Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you gentlemen doing?
Doing good.
It's been a while. Thank you for joining us on a Monday night. Obviously, I think if you're here, you understand why we're doing this tonight. Steven sort of surprised everyone, and I guess we can talk about this now. There was no pre-mention of letting testers speak. There was no sort of, hey, you guys, in a week or tomorrow, you're going to get to talk about the game. They just sort of sprang it on everyone today that they were going to allow a verbal no NDA. We can't obviously show any pictures or video, but we get to finally talk about what we've been experiencing. And all of us have been testing, so we're all going to get to have different viewpoints on kind of where things are. But we also want to kind of answer some questions if there are questions, and we can finally do that. So it took 50 episodes. This is also episode 50, yay. And, you know, for 49 of them, it's sort of been, we either didn't know, or the latter half of them, we couldn't talk about what we knew. So now we actually get to finally start merging at least what was not known within the public space. But we now get to start merging a whole lot of things. Hopefully that will lead to some more very interesting discussions. It starts to put things more from a theory perspective into, hey, this is actually what we're seeing. Obviously still mixed with some theory crafting. But so I don't even know where to begin other than just letting you guys start talking about your experience.
It had the feeling of like meeting somebody in person that you've known online for years, and like being able to talk with like comfortable familiarity and stuff. Just the process of actually being in the world and playing the game. I hadn't been in any previous tests or anything before. This was my first time actually getting in the world. So, it was a bit of an experience for me. I really appreciate what I got to see, and things in really good shape, all things being considered, knowing that just a few months ago, they were putting the call out for a network engineer, and there was a bit of rubber banding and a little bit of stuff going on that, obviously things are probably not as optimized as they could be, and they've got a lot of stuff to do still. But for the state that we got to see, I'm pretty happy with it. It definitely feels a lot more like what we saw in the videos they do on the dev streams, that like this is the game, and that we weren't just being given like curated in-engine fluff to try to hype and promote something that isn't quite there. It's moving pretty far along. It's in pretty decent shape right now.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that you hadn't gotten to play previous ones. So we got Euro in through the content creator. Everybody who was a content creator previously got alpha access, and Phantom and I have already been Braver of World, so we were in a few others previously. And, it's okay for an alpha. Just getting into alpha, leaving pre-alpha and moving into alpha. And we did get to see some nodes pop from stage 0 to stage 3. So that was okay. It pretty much just plays like a basic mmorpg at this point. But we did get some node activity. So that's what we're hoping to see. That's what we're kind of here for. We were just, before we came on live, we're talking about, what I think MMORPGs have to have a solid thing for something to do once you reach max level. And the rotation of nodes and how that's going to, we're constructing nodes and progressing them and then destructing them, destroying them. Uh, I think that's going to create a nice loop for us so that we can ever quest. We'll have different quests as different nodes pop up, and different races gain control of the nodes and all of this. So I think that's the kind of thing that we need to keep us ever questing, which is what I've been hoping for since 1997 or something like that. So
I mean, I think it's good for people
it's a nice
to,
start.
we can't show. So I think maybe explaining what we did. And again, if you have questions, put them in here. This is, we can answer them now to the best of our abilities anyways. So, certainly we don't have to dance around topics. So ask whatever questions you might want to ask. And for anyone that's watching that is new to our show, hopefully there are some people. I also want to kind of point out that we're not necessarily a group of people that just says praise, praise, praise for whatever game we're covering. So, we all want the game to succeed. So just beforehand, I don't want to get the FU comments later on, although we might still for digs, but those seem to come no matter what. So I played a cleric primarily. Log into, you create your character. There's not a ton of options at this point. I don't, who knows? Character creator is not probably the most important part of testing, I guess, at this point. Just making sure you have basics down. And it was the tank, cleric, and mage basically are the three classes that you get to play with. Traditional leveling system. They have active abilities are currently in for testing. Passives and other things are not. But as you level up, you get talent points. You get to assign those. Basically, what you've seen in stream. That part is currently in the game. But so I primarily did a cleric, and you log in, run to. At this point, it's all pretty bare bones. There are some quests. You run in and you have to go kill something. You have to go find somebody. Find a land, find this and that. There's the traditional blacksmithing quest where to be able to craft, you have to go harvest. So it's, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Everything is kind of as you would expect it. Basic sort of text decision trees, do this, do that. And then that's, you obviously can group. There are some group content. But then there's just, various different mobs spread throughout the world. A couple of portals to get to some other islands. As Diggs mentioned, there are nodes that are currently in, and your basic merchants and things like that exist. The cleric itself, I actually found very fun. I didn't do a lot of group content. I did mostly just soloing. Cleric seemed very good for that. There's, and I'm going to forget the names. I think Divine Judgment maybe was one, the basic sort of attack ability. There's another that's a whip that you heal, you do damage, heal yourself, and also restore your mana. And then, of course, you have your heal spells. I actually found the combat to be pretty fun for a cleric. Now, obviously, I wasn't really healing a lot of other people, so I don't know what that experience will be like. But solo playing, it was pretty good for an alpha state, and you also have your active, your non-tab target abilities. That would kind of drive me nuts a little bit. I would cast something, and then I would go straight to sort of the non-tab target, and I would kind of go past the monster. A lot of that is still, there's a lot of clear networking issues. There was a lot of rubber banding. I would be running down a mountain and all of a sudden jump up into the air and fall down and almost die. Now that was also, I think they were running some tests actively while players were in the game, so I don't think that's necessarily just the game. I will say that seemed a little bit worse than it's been before. Hopefully that's just because they were testing things as we were playing. But that was sort of the general experience. Harvesting is what they've shown, kind of what you'd expect. There's frankly nothing in it, as I think Diggs, you might have mentioned. I mean, it's what you would expect from an MMO. My sort of impression running around is it's this weird kind of modern mesh of Lineage 2 and EverQuest 2 on how everything kind of fits together. But I don't even know if that would make sense to people, but it did to me in my head. So anyways.
Phantom X hated this test, and this is the most I've heard him talk in forever. And he seems like he was excited about his experience. I think maybe he's just excited to be able to talk about it. But
that I can finally talk about it, and I'm trying not to be negative.
Yeah, okay. You're doing a good job. So I have a question for you though. What level mobs were you fighting mostly?
Oh, so that was interesting. And again, this is all balancing. Obviously, I think they're not really looking into balancing stuff. I mean, as a level 3 cleric, I could kill level 7, 8 mobs. Now, there are some that are clearly marked for groups, didn't try those. I could push it to, I think at level 4, I was able to do some level 11, level 12 mobs. But, when I got to like 16, I was dead in the water. Part of that is just the HP sort of expanse. My abilities just couldn't keep up with the exponential growth in their hit points.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're fighting too. I think I found out after I was done testing that the Raptors are the best. They have the lowest hit points and don't do too much damage. But yeah, everything seemed to be calibrated to help us level fairly quickly. I think they wanted us to get to level 10. We got like, it seemed like we got 1,000 experience points just for talking to the first NPC that would give us a quest. I
Yeah.
think we didn't even have to.
That was not in any of the previous, and I think Steven had mentioned beforehand that they were going to, try to basically level us up as much as they could just to see that process work. But yeah, that was sort of like, oh, level 1 to 3, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that whole thing, and also I think they were trying to get us so that we'd be able to get the nodes popping fairly quickly. We got several on Resna anyway. We got several to stage 2, and I think we got even 2 up to stage 3 by the end of the test. So they wiped Friday night, and we did not have a wipe Saturday. So we had same gameplay from Saturday through Sunday. And in that amount of time, we were able to have two villages on Resna, along with the vote. So I actually I played a cleric as well, mostly, and I did have a chance to duo and heal last night. About 2 hours before the end of the test, I ran into somebody who wanted to group. We were in the cave. Did you guys do the cave quest?
Oh man, I did not like the cave quests. This is definitely one of those things that reminds me I'm not playing D&D, that if I went into the cave, picked 5 flowers, then found the dude at the entrance who was looking for flowers, I'd been like, hey, yo, I preemptively picked these cool looking flowers. Oh, you're looking for them? Oh, I shouldn't pick more than 5? Well, golly gee, I'm glad that I found you. Here, take these and give me some paltry experience. Instead, no, you have to talk to the person, then do the thing. I didn't even notice them on the way in. I thought they were just another player sitting there. So there, the green name tag should have been an indicator, but I just breezed straight past them because they weren't the quest I was there for. And the quest I was there for, like many people, we found the second dude. We were running around up and down, left and right, trying to find the first person. And then when you actually ask someone who knows, they say, oh yeah, there's a pile of dead corpse at the top of the stone ramp. You need to interact with it first before you can talk to them. Well, the quest says to find both of them. So instead of being able to find each one and then advance with it, you had to go up the ramp again. You had to find the damn corpse, be like, she's dead, Jim, and then go down and talk to the dude. Otherwise, he's just sitting there like flipping out with his eyes rolled in the back of his head and his tongue hanging out. That was very unsatisfying.
Were you able to get 5 flowers?
Oh yeah, it was easy. The fifth one is when you get the running buff. That's the one how you get your capsule collider across to the really tough jump right nearby him. It felt like, yeah, the fifth guy gives you a speed boost, so you actually had enough speed to cross the gap. I couldn't blink across it as a mage. I specifically needed that dude's speed buff for finding him in that sequence of the quest before I could get enough momentum to make that jump. And, that's one of the things for me, too, is that for a game that requires that much platforming, the characters feel like slippery capsule colliders. And I'm not really a fan of that. Give us a little more grip. Give us like a ledge grab and stuff like some other games have done, because quite honestly, if you're asking me to platform, but you're not giving me the tools for platform, it ain't satisfying. Not in the least bit. I got through it. I climbed a really high mountain peak so I could see as far in the horizon as I could. And I loved it. In fact, even on my, 8-year-old now potato, I was able to climb to a high peak, do a little once around pirouette, see what was in the area, and man, it looked great. It didn't have any slowdown. I could see ocean as far as the eye could see all the way across, the island for the most part in all directions. That looked fantastic. The fact that an MMO's actually got that, the whole thing that Stephen was saying, that you can go to all the places you can see, it's like, damn, that is kind of like D&D at that point, because a DM might not recommend that you climb to the top of the mountain, but if you do it, you can damn well see what's out there from that point. So that part was satisfying, but just the general kind of platforming, that flower quest, and having to find a dead corpse with no marker or indication, and the press E to interact was a very small window. It's easy to pass by. That was not satisfying. So, and then the other part that wasn't satisfying is, come on now, we all came through the portal. We all came from the same place. Why should we fret about someone who died? Like, why is their armor even on the ground? Shouldn't they form into a pile of ashes and respawn at the camp? This is where the story logic is going to start to have to, get filled in. Otherwise, they're basically saying all players are heroes and everyone else is just a dunderhead.
Yep. Go Phantom. You were going to say something.
Oh, he just mentioned the E to interact. That kind of would drive me nuts in a few spots, especially, it fits in with a lot of key mappings for current games. But what drove me the most nuts would be the looting mechanic. One, you have to be kind of right on top of things for it to show you the E. And two, it just, after you're killing, and having to actually wait just even a split, a second or whatever it was for that thing to just let me loot the damn corpse. I don't want to sit there and wait for it to fill so I can open it up. That kind of drove me.
There were a couple other things on that for me. First, being in a group where it's just on everybody gets, fair share of everything. You don't actually have to click into the bag. Anybody clicks it, it just goes to the next person's bag. And, I definitely like that a lot more than having to actually click into it and choose the items and then click out. But when things got really laggy, the E to interact got really sticky. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it was a UI issue. If you pressed E and then pressed E again before it actually started activating, it would show your meter wind up and then show your meter wind down. And then you had to walk away for like 10 seconds before you could come back and loot it. That was frustrating. Gotta do something better on that one, I say.
Yeah, I need to make sure I put that in the forums. I forgot to put how frustrating that the E was. I think that is a common hated mechanic.
Yeah, with the UI, that drove me the most nuts. The other was when I'm trying to just look at the journal and how it automatically pops the map right in the middle of your screen. Also just drove me nuts. Unless you're going to put, specific location on that map where I'm supposed to run, I don't need to see that map,
But they do if you press, I think it was L when your map was up, and it would show the quest list, and you click on the actual quest. It would give you the indicator of where you're approximately supposed to go.
I mean, even if I'm just trying to read something about, what I'm trying to, and I don't, it just, because it covers your whole screen too. That just kind of drove me nuts, but sorry.
And what was the indicator, Neuro?
You would either get red dots telling you where you're specifically trying to go, or you would get a circle giving kind of a general area of the entrance to an area where you needed to do stuff. So for the cave quest, you'd get a red dot on the map, like a little red diamond. And then once you've actually gotten there, that location gets replaced by kind of a grayish circle to let you know, yeah, this is the approximate area. And yes, D2 Phoenix Fire, you're right. The red dots didn't always pop up. I noticed some of that too.
So, I have to remember to go back to my original story about the cave, but on the cave quest, the red dot, so when I pressed that, it gave me a red dot up in the north. So I was running up to the north. It was kind of by the ferry. I was running around there looking for a cave and could not find a cave. I thought maybe it was going to take the ferry and go to the other side. There was no cave on the other side. That was Saturday. Sunday afternoon, I noticed while I was running around, when I clicked on it, an arrow appeared when I was facing south, and the blue arrow kind of gave. If went in the direction of the blue arrow, that finally took me to the cave. It was on the total opposite side of that continent from where the red dot was, and I don't think the red dot was appearing for me at all on Sunday. Um, so they must be still playing around with that. I thought the mini map um, was the worst mini map I've ever seen in my life. One, because it's pretty much completely covered with mob markers, and there are a few quest target markers. They're often covered up by mobs until you get close enough, and then kind of separates and you can see it. Or they will be completely at the edge of the map, and you can kind of see like a tiny bit of it. So you can kind of see, okay, I think I need to go in that direction, general direction, but it gives you no clue about distance, how far you're going to go. Um, yeah, and then I think you open up the big map, and that's where you hope to see a red dot or
Yep.
something like that. It's not a very good system, but there's
The map
time
was
to.
also low res. That didn't help much.
Yeah. Um, so, but it's an alpha, so I just hope that gets better over time and cleaned up.
So
One of
Um,
the other things with that for me was the ones where you need to find a location, and it's not sufficient to be in the general area. No, you have to walk all the way up. You have to be sniffing that griffin's butt before you get that objective. You have to go all the way into the rabbit cave. Oh, wait, no, it's not inside the rabbit cave. You go on top of the rabbit cave. Same, Z or same XY location, just the Z was different. No way to tell that from the quest marker. So a little bit more work probably will go into that to add more of like a region or proximity instead of you must go to this very fixed point. Now, I understand if you're trying to get to an NPC, it's like this NPC exists here. And, well, that makes sense. You get close enough and you can find the NPC. Just, don't make it that you have to walk to a certain point, then talk to the NPC. It's fine to just talk to the NPC. They're the actual target.
I don't,
so go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I don't know how many people are watching now or will watch later actually are testing or not testing. The process, I don't know how much people know about how this has been kind of going on. There have been scheduled testing dates like this weekend, but then there's also a lot of spot testing. So one positive thing I will say is that as they are actively developing and they want to try something new, I mean, they're getting players in to test that as they go. The only thing I would say is, obviously it's a small amount of players, and it seems like whenever they add in a lot of players is when they find massive problems. So the sooner we can get more people testing, probably the better. But the process itself has been pretty decent, and actually too, whenever they're running into errors, rubber banding, lag on the servers, those sorts of things. Stephen has also been very vocal within the testing Discord and explaining what's been going on and what they're doing, which I think has also been pretty nice to see, pretty refreshing. Explaining what they can fix, what they can't fix. So.
Well, and I will say so. We were kind of expecting there might be some pushback, a lot of negative pushback, because Friday was supposed to be the no NDA at all. We were supposed to be able to stream, um, do screenshots and everything, talk about it on Friday. And we found out Thursday was it that we found out that it wasn't going to be?
I think
Maybe
they gave us a little more advance notice than that, but
maybe
yeah,
Wednesday.
when they did it was like just after the live stream, sometime a few days later, I think that they actually told us, hey, we're actually changing up the scheduling a little bit.
Monday,
So
Bardic.
yeah, so we got some little advance notice, but you know, that for me that was a blessing. I was like, gee, I was gonna get my personal channel all set up with art and everything in a hurry, and I got so much other stuff to do this week. Like, oh, okay, cool. That gives me a little time to actually spend the time on that.
Um, and so we were thinking there would be some negative pushback for the delay again in um, the releasing the NDA. But it was mostly positive reaction on the forums. I think it was a good idea because it's not really in. I don't think it's in good enough shape for the big time streamers to start talking about it. There's not a lot for them to talk about. Um, Another good thing is when you're talking about small number of people testing, it still brought down the servers. They had all kinds of problems with. I mean, every server was full for the most part on Friday and Saturday. Um, and if we'd had a lot more streamers and stuff in, then I mean, just the streamers themselves, let alone anybody that they might have had buy out a venture pack and try and get in as well. Um, they needed more servers. Um, uh, so I think on the one hand, they weren't really. I mean, it's typical not to be prepared for how many people are going to jump in. Um, but that's even with the people who chose not to stream or not to play because they were going to be playing TBC, or was it Elder Scrolls? Was that the other one that was happening this weekend? Um, uh, but mostly positive feedback, and mostly positive feedback for the people testing. So I think that's why he went ahead and got rid of the verbal NDA, because it's been mostly positive feedback from the people playing.
Yeah, the thing we were talking a little bit beforehand, and I stopped. That was funniest to me out of this weekend. We've talked a lot about PvP and PKers and how you get them to coexist with PvE players who are going to absolutely be needed and probably make up the majority of the players in this game. Like, how do you bring them together? And we've talked a lot about in theory and all that and how they'll do corruption. But what just made me absolutely laugh, in an alpha testing state, they had to say, quit, don't PK. And I think that's obviously what they don't want you to. They want to get players running around, and so clearly that's the right thing. But just the idea that they even in an alpha testing phase have to go in and say, don't do this. I just can't wait to see what happens when we have large numbers of players and the problems. Now, obviously, we don't have corruption. We don't have.
Yeah.
We don't know if there's no real way to tell who's turning red and all of those sorts of things. But still, just people know. That's why they had to say, don't do this.
Yeah. I think people are actually spawn camping the gate, and that's where they're like, hard line, no. If you get caught, if we even see that you did it in the logs, that's the hammer.
And so I put the. Go ahead, Diggs.
No, say what you.
I was going to say, so I put in chat, what the odds of making this July 1 date for the sort of visual drop, I guess, of the, Alpha 1. What the odds everyone places it to be. You already typed out yours, Diggs, which is no. I tend to agree with you. I would think, whenever the next Theory Alpha, whenever Alpha 1 is supposed to go, I think I would have, obviously I'm not in the development, I don't know Steven's thoughts or logic, but, I don't know how that would look in front of, tens of thousands of players watching a stream on Twitch to see all that rubber banding and everything. to the people that are testing, it just makes sense. If you've done this before, that's just a part of the process. This is very much an alpha state game. Systems aren't in yet. The back end is still being worked on. So I don't know after this, hopefully they got some good data, but can they put things together in a month and a half to where they're ready for July? I don't know.
I think if they wanted it to look prettier and not show the signs of the rubber banding and the network latency stuff, they could have cheated and had things more reliant on client side than client server communications. And it might have looked prettier, but ultimately it wouldn't be as viable as a test for them because they wouldn't really be able to know how things actually look, get the right results, get the right data. And ultimately, this wasn't a 3-day playing weekend. This was a 3-day testing weekend that requires you to play in order to test. So,
Well,
is what it
it
is.
wasn't quite 3 days. It wasn't quite 3 days because we could barely play on Friday. When it was delayed, wasn't it delayed until like 4? And
Yeah, I
when
think it
the
was like 3 o'clock or something when they started getting things up and running. Yeah, that's fine.
and then over at 6, was it 3 hours? What did we play to on Friday? It was.
I think they always shut the servers off at 9 p.m.
I don't
So
think it went. I don't think it went to 9 the first
it
night,
might have been cut off early.
and it was shut off at 6 on. So it might have gone to 7. Maybe it was like something like or 8. Yeah, maybe it was something like 3 to 8. Maybe it was just an hour early. And then Saturday was 11 to no 12 to 6, I think. Um, but that's fine. They did some hot fixes and it made performance better and all that. Um, but what I was going to say is the positive to me is that we still did get to play. So the NDA was extended for an extra month, but at least we still got to play. And I think that's the big thing for me in all these other games that we followed. Being able to get into the game is really important. So uh, I won't mention one of the other games that I should mention, but my problem with that game was not the delays, because dates are all they're going to be missed. Never trust dates from developers. Um, but we never got into play. We never got into move around or test or whatever. We never got actually into the game to experience what it might be like. And we had the opportunity to do that several times with Ashes already, which is great. And again, at least if they're going to do a delay, it was on the NDA, but we still got to test. Um, and I think they made some progress since the last time I was in it. I did not see so many villages popping up. I did not see um, the announcements letting us know that villages were um, popping up and vassals. It's now this node has now become a vassal of that node. Those kind of messages were really cool to see. But so my story with the cave, I did not find the dead dude, so I was not able to get into the quest line. I ran into somebody else who was running around looking for flowers before we had found the dude, so I think we could not get to all of them anyway. Um, so I found the tank, and he asked if I would like to group, and I said sure. Um, and then I realized this dude's like mowing down everything before I can even get to them. The tank was much more powerful, or able to kill much more quickly than my cleric was.
No
Um,
range though. They have an engage to get close, but they don't have like range attacks. In fact, they even said if you get a bow, sell it immediately, throw it away. Don't even touch that. It's going to break your character. You're going to have to restart.
but the tank didn't need to because it's got the lasso that pulls it in, and then they have the other one that pulls them to the mob. So between those two, by the time I got up to them, uh, they were dead because I think we were both level 4 by that time, and the mobs in the cave are level 3. Well, yeah, level 3 and 4, and we just mow down anything that's our level. Um, and So I realized after about 15 minutes, I should probably just heal him because I'm not, well, also because I would have to move around and get him out of my focus, so that I could target the mob. So by the time I get in, maneuver, and I'm able to attack, he's already killed it. So I realized I should just heal him, and that worked great. So we went to another area, and we went to a beach and just started mowing down tide tide watchers and
Tidebreakers.
tide breakers
Yeah,
and
the
crab.
big otter things. Yeah.
Yeah. So he killed everything in sight, and I just healed him. And I think we were fighting mobs that were like 11 to 12, while we were 4, 5, and 6. So we were getting some pretty good XP. That worked really nicely. Um, on the forums, there's been like I said, one of the big debates has been DPS meters, which Steven is not supporting. Um,
He's not
I'm a fan of
supporting third party ones, but if
no,
I'm not
not
mistaken, he had talked about wanting to give tools to guilds and individuals who want to see what being at the top of the charts meant, and being able to have metrics for it. So I'm thinking that he may have misspoken, and I don't think he's actually overwriting the previous statements that he had made.
No, he said specifically no DPS meters. He's against them, but there will be a personal combat log, um, and I think there are leaderboards, which is a little different. There's no like group combat tracker type stuff, which I think is a little bit different than leaderboards. But um, uh, and the purpose is he doesn't want people to focus on the um, mechanics and the mechanical numbers. He's not. He wants people to be focused more on how people are behaving during the battle, and think about what abilities they're using, um, and how that affects the group, rather than just going, okay, your DPS was blah blah blah, you got to get it up to this. Um,
I just expect that it's going
and
to be people doing the same thing they do when they cheat, which is run Windows in a virtual machine in Linux, and then while it's all exposed because you're in Linux peering into it, they'll have their own separate tools for tracking DPS. It's a bit of a way to circumvent, but I have a feeling people will find their ways to make the tools if they're not made available anyway. So
yeah, there will be
yeah.
some people who do that, which is fine, but it will cut down on it, and more people will be able to focus on the builds that they want. And with all the augments that we have, I think it's going to be really difficult to track in a lot of ways. Every class can use every weapon, so like I don't even know how you go through that and try and limit everybody to one weapon and one set of abilities and all that. But my point is that some people were saying, well, how do you track this? How do you do it if you don't have a DPS meter? And it's like, well, you see what happens. And like, it really didn't take me too long to go, there's no point in me fighting. I might as well just heal because that's the best strategy that we have right now. I mean, if you just pay a little bit of attention, you'll kind of figure out what works.
And the mark is success, right? If you're successful in what you're doing, who really cares how fast you do it? Yeah. I mean, that's I think the big.
Yeah. Only if you've got back spawns to to deal with and not be chased by.
That was better.
We'll get there.
In some of the earlier testing phases, reanimated whatever the animators, the very first quest. They
animated armor.
Yeah.
Armor.
The very first sets of testing, it was hard to find them because everybody was killing them. So the respawn was clearly improved for this go around. But I guess that's that's something not. It's always hard talking about nitpicking an alpha state game. Like, where do you actually talk about the design elements versus the things that you just sort of expect to be, problematic at this stage? And Hamstorg had mentioned in chat a little while ago that he's overall, I'm not worried about this. Come from a big community, and basically says, think that he's not worried. I'm not saying I'm worried about the state either. I mean, we've since today, when in our Discord, it was sort of how we can finally talk about, okay, well, what do you think? Yes or no? It's like, I don't think it's that easy of an answer at this point, because this is very much an alpha state game. That's, you sort of expect the things you have. I'm not worried. What worries me is nodes, and I know they've shown us some of these transformations from 0 to 2 to 3 or whatever, but I'm worried about seeing nodes as they were presented initially in Kickstarter video, and that's something we've not seen. So I'm not trying to focus on that too much, because again, these are all very early. What?
But the new thing that we got was or at least for me, and that I'm glad that we at least have that. We didn't have it in APOC. Is nodes becoming vassals, so we know that that's happening to some degree as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly showing advancements, but it's just not. There's been so much we've not heard that we sort of expected to hear by now, and some of it's making its way in. But I think people who aren't testing, it's all about managing expectations come July, right? So, how do you get everyone to understand this is very much an alpha state game? You're streaming it on Twitch, you have thousands of viewers. How do you get everyone to understand that? Because you can say that, right? Well, this is an alpha game, because we've been saying that all night. But a lot of people just aren't going to understand that. And that's where I get, I bet they just wish they could have just launched into Alpha 1 for a little while at least, without the NDA, or with the NDA still in place, to test some of these larger things. Because what we have seen is, as they add more people, that is when they run into bigger issues. They get things pretty good for a small group, and then they open it up to a larger group, and things just start to kind of crap out.
It breaks their networking.
And I also did want to talk about that a little too before we start to run out of time. Having tested really throughout during the entire cycle, as I always mentioned, I was backer number 3 on Kickstarter. I'm proud of that fact. So yes, I do want this game to succeed. And I have the lifetime subscription. So, so I've been testing really throughout the entire process. Content-wise, and this is, again, where do you nitpick about, an alpha state? The content has not really changed much over the last 6 to 8 months. They have added some newer quests, but they're basic quests. They have added some, a lot of the nodes that you saw transform, they've existed throughout the entire testing phase, but they haven't transformed for you. So I have seen them in sort of the 0 state, the ones that, we've seen those. So they've clearly added some buildings and some other things. But that's what they seem to have been working on over the last several months, which makes sense to me, because I think it is probably their weakest point in development of this game is sort of the networking back in. That clearly seems to be where they focused a lot, and that's why I don't test every phase. So when I come back and I haven't tested for several months and things really just kind of look the same, it's not that they're not doing anything. They're just working on things you don't get to see. And what was a little disconcerting, and again, I don't know if this is just the higher player number, but the rubber banding, the lag, the combat lag was by far worse over the weekend than it was 6 months ago. And I don't know if that's, again, they were doing tests as we were playing, so I think that should be made known as well. I forget what they called them, snapshots or
well, they were also, when they initially brought it up, they had like a verbose logging profile that they didn't mean to be using. So it was getting every tiny little detail of everything going on. And I don't even know if that much data was even useful to them. So that was one of the reasons why they brought it down and did a hot fix, is because it was just logging way too much. I haven't tried the different logging formats in Unreal. I know with Unity, if you set something to verbose logging, you get absolutely freaking everything, which again, probably more than you actually need for the thing you're trying to test. So that was a good fix on their part to change it to less impactful logging profile. But I do want to bring up, again, on the careers page, if you know anybody who can fill these roles, Send them along. Unreal networking engineer, gameplay engineer, generalist, networking administrator, and cloud security engineer are the 4 top positions on their career page that they're hiring for. So yeah, they're doing the best they can with what they've got, but it looks like they're still looking for some people to fill in the ranks and really help give them a boost on all the network related stuff. They might power through it on their own. They might have somebody that they're training up internally to handle a lot of this stuff. But the fact that there's 3, maybe 4 of the top positions there related to networking, I think that's one of the things that they're still trying to staff for right now. That was brought up during one of the dev streams, I want to say a couple of months ago. It's a thing. They've been looking. They've been needing somebody. So
Yeah.
I can give them a little bit of leeway that they're being out in the open, maybe not saying, hey, our networking sucks, someone come save us, but a bit of an admission that we're not as far as we want to be in terms of staff, we're not as far as we want to be in terms of tech, and we've got to do this testing to figure out the stability and figure out UI and all the other things that we need feedback on. But we we'll admit that we don't have perfect networking going on, that things are certainly not optimal right now. So it's fair that there was the network issues and the latency and the rubber banding and stuff. It's more players, kind of to be expected that these are the sorts of things that would happen. They said the more distributed around the server we were and not concentrated, the better that helped with things. So that has something to do with it a bit, I'm sure.
I mean, but my experience can be up on a mountain all by myself, running back down it, and all of a sudden my character jumps up, back falls. So I mean, obviously it's going to vary, but then the point out there is those you're developing a game where you're going to have massive sieges. So you also don't want that to happen when you have a lot of people around. Now the big rubber banding was not that often. The thing I noticed probably more was the combat sort of interaction, and I found that almost everywhere, where I could have 2 abilities off and starting into my Q attack, and the mob gets a hit on me with like half their health already gone or something like that. So that was sort of an experience too. But and in the end,
there were a lot of enemies that just wouldn't move. They didn't want to path. Sometimes it was if I started with my Q attack, they would path. Sometimes it's just like fireball. Okay, you're gonna stand there. Area fire attack. Okay, you're gonna keep standing there. Fireball. Mana drain laser.
I felt that was mostly true right near the starting zone. When I moved past the starting zone, especially once I crossed the sea, then that's when the mob became active.
I mean, I will say, after portaling over somewhere else, the big rubber banding of just like clunk, clunk, clunk is pretty well evened out. But the combat stuff, at least for me, was still noticeable in sort of the interactions. But it's the end was just really crazy. When so the end of the night for me on yesterday, Steven brought everyone in to fight a raid boss. In the starting, I think it was the starting area. I really didn't even get a chance to look around. He summoned everyone, and it was quite hilarious because essentially everyone was summoned into a ball, and just sort of couldn't get out, like you were in a giant magnet of some sort. Eventually, someone killed me, and I fell through the map, and that was an interesting, very trippy experience. But unfortunately, logging in and out didn't solve that for me, so I had to start a new character and just eventually said, I think I'm done for the weekend. But
I think T-Elf said that she kind of had him. That's when her night ended too. Getting summoned by Steven on Lyneth. My feedback would be that they've had this networking issue for years now, going back to APOC. So this is a chronic problem that they have, and that's why we've didn't release in 2017. Or when were we due? When was the original date? 2019? What was the original date? It was supposed to take 2 years, right? So maybe 2018.
I can. I'll pull up Kickstarter and find out.
I was about to do that too.
but it's the network issues that they've been struggling with for at least 2 years. I think 3, because I think that started happening in 2018. So I would hope that they were a little bit further along, especially when it comes to character create. And I've partially been ruined by Landmark, because in Landmark Alpha back in 2014, I was able to create a character that looks like me, and I can't create any characters in Ashes that look African. And I mean, we can make some kind of tan white people, I think, but
Kind of.
making someone who's non-European is kind of difficult. Um, because of that, and I think this is something that developers should be uh, moving towards. We need to have, even in your alpha, white Europeans should not always be your default character model. And I was hoping to talk with Matt Broom about this, because I had the same problem on H1Z1. And he was just, well, we start with the default, which is fine. But why does the default always have to be a white European male or possibly white European female? Um, and it does not feel nice, again, having come from Landmark, when I could play a character that looks like me. It does not feel nice to come into alpha and not and have to play as a white European, as someone who is not a white European. Um, so I ended up playing a female dwarf, and my female dwarf is my naming conventions is the character that looks like me is named Diggs, and then the character that doesn't look like me is the second one is a female, named Briarthorn. So in this case, I chose a female dwarf. Um, One of the fun parts about getting into the alpha has been seeing other people that I know either from streams or from the forums, like T Elf. And that's just a lot of fun, just to see people you know. And I mean, that's the fun of having a massively multiplayer online game, is you get to see lots of people, but you also get to see people that you know. And
I saw Simurg at the starting point looking kind of AFK when I was pretty much coming in for one of my characters. I actually ran a couple of characters. Well, initially I made all dwarfs name neurotoxin as a cleric and propagated them through all the servers because I was trying to figure out, all right, which is the one I can actually connect to. Maybe it's this one. Maybe it's this one. I was just swapping between servers. Then they did the wipe. It was like, well, it's not going to be neurotoxin this time, or maybe it's not going to be that neurotoxin. So I was running a mage for a lot of it, and it was I think one of the elf mage, and it seemed like playing as a wizardly character, playing solo in an MMO, you're going to be tough enough that the things chewing on you aren't going to kill you before you kill them, but it definitely works a lot better if you got a tank. I also did play a tank, and among the three, they very much they felt like conventional MMO characters. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing especially noteworthy. You've got your basic attack, you've got some class specific abilities to help define yourself. You start wearing the type of equipment that would be expected for the type of character you're playing. That's what it is. I did with the fighter really enjoy just going off on my own. Their name was Explore, and that's all I did. Pretty much as soon as I came in the world, figured out which direction was north and just started going, killing along the way. I only got to about halfway through level 2 or maybe close to level 3, and I wasn't really too focused on leveling. I was focused on exploring. Only died once along the way. I think it was to like a level 11. But yeah, it was real easy for me to punch above my weight class and take out a lot of things solo and, get the little crap loot to sell from them. That was a lot of it, and just exploring. And it was really, really nice. In fact, I think I enjoyed that more than trying to do the questing, especially because the the mage seemed to have a couple broken quests. The one where you catch the runes was broken, and Captain Quinn or whoever wasn't giving me a quest dialogue when I was coming back to them. That only happened on the mage, so I was like, well, that's fun, but kind of sucks to be a little blocked on the quests. So yeah, with the tank just going straight north, it was fun. Getting to see all the environments, getting to see the distribution of the enemies, where they're at, what they look like. I want to say was it the cave raptors that were the zebra looking ones, or maybe that was the plains raptors. Thought that was kind of funny. I found and reported a bug on brood crawlers that were huge. Their entire scale was bulked up. I'm sure you saw them too. And their nameplate was like quarter of the screen. Giant. And I initially just reported the one, and then soon after it's like, oh dear God, there's a freaking family of these things. They weren't particularly difficult. They were still like level 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever sort of easy mobs. But it was just funny that they had a scale error somewhere with some of the assets and some of the distribution, such that this particular type of enemy, most seen kind of going along the northwest area into the nice lush looking tropical stuff, those were the ones that had these giant name tags and were just inexplicably large. Just kind of funny. The environments look beautiful. I gotta say, if they just made a walking simulator out of this, it would still be doing pretty good, because that is a very, very nice environment. Their art team has put in their work and it shows. I am really excited to see the rest of the game world after having seen what we've seen of it.
So speaking of art, I have a question, and this is for people who have played in chat, or maybe you've just have an opinion based on what you've seen from the dev live streams. One thing I just realized that I hadn't realized before is that the available classes are the Trinity, right? Tank, mage, and cleric. Dwarves. People in the forums have been saying that the Ashes dwarves are gnomes, and nobody's going to want to play them because they don't look badass enough. And they need to be way more beefy and wider, and they should look like Warhammer dwarves. What do people think?
No, in fact, I would say maybe for the junior, you could maybe make them a little bulkier, but I imagine, since they're more of like a Polynesian themed style with the Nakua, I'm fine with them being the current proportions. Make their skin darker, give them cooler hair and some tattoos and stuff. Like I like them. I like them the way they're currently built and represented. For me, if there was a size slider, I would make it as small as possible, because in a system where, targeting and visibility is everything, being the dude you can't just click on and you have to mash tab to hope you get to the right one, that's perfect. Because I'm going to be playing a ranger anyway. So I'm going to just be pelting stuff from a range, lobbing rain of arrows, and, setting traps and throwing my ranger summoner pets at people, whatever it's going to be. But doing everything I can to be the tiniest mushroom man I can is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, I think for the Nakua, so I think if they were, Forge, Undermountain, Dwarves, Warhammer kind of works okay, because you just imagine them swinging that hammer down.
Yeah, that's the Dunir, though.
That's I'm saying even just classic dwarf anywhere. But yeah, with the Polynesian dwarves, the Nakua, I also think that they should not be overly wide, and not necessarily super muscly. Um, but lots of people in the forums were saying no, they need to follow. But my thing was, I think they look very similar in proportion to EQ and EQ2 dwarves, and that's what we should expect, since we have so many people from SLE and Daybreak as our devs. I think they're more likely to draw inspiration from that than they are to Warhammer, and especially at this late date where all the concept art has been like this, and these are the models that we have. I don't think they're all of a sudden going to switch to Warhammer style dwarves, and if they did, I don't know when the game would release, because
Yeah, I think they looked fine. That just seems to be a lot of people probably going off their expectation of, another game rather than trying to actually understand the lore of what they're testing and where these races are supposed to come from and what they're supposed to look like. I think they looked fine.
yeah.
So
I mean, if somebody like dwells from the caves in the Underdark and that sort of stuff, I would expect them to be like pale and emaciated, not like these burly ripped people. If we're going with the lore that they're like the people of the mountain carved from stone or whatever, then okay, that works for the Dunir. But then what about the Nukua? Were they carved from coral or something? Like, there's different lores that can be pulled from for how they come to the style of their dwarves, and then even in that, there's two different versions of it. They could eat really well in the DOP crew. They might eat really well in the underground, but hard to say. I haven't gotten to see too much of it yet. I guess the Underdark's pretty lush and vibrant, though. So yeah, there's probably pretty good eats there.
I would imagine you also have a good segment of people that have just bought into Alpha, or did that reopen yet? It did, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I suspect there's an element of that. There's probably also an element of people. I mean, I've done this before. Actually, there's a current games now where I'm just waiting. I don't follow them at all until it's ready to start alpha or beta testing. So that's probably also people starting to come back. But because you're right, Diggs, these things have been known for a while. That understanding development, if you had concerns as a group about how they look, that's something that should have been talked about a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think when they're wearing their full like higher level armor, they're gonna look beefy anyway. Doesn't look like they're gonna go full on clown status like WoW, where like warlocks just look like some sort of aesthetic war crime walking around. But yeah, they will have a nice appeal to like the bigger and tougher sets of armor across everybody.
I think a lot of what I'm seeing in the forums is, it's a massively multiplayer online game. Lots of people aren't even here for the RP. They're just here because it's a massively multiplayer game where they can PvP. And we've got lots of different play styles, and you're not going to be able to please everybody. Lots of people are going to have different games that they prefer to play and different aesthetic stuff. And really, it all boils down to what Steven likes for the most part. And
I think
so,
he's willing to do a consensus with the team at this point, like how they got the leads involved with picking out the furniture for the new office. I think Steven's got a little bit more of a tendency towards like, these are people that have made the games I want to make, so I'll rely on them instead of just being like, the chief duckman that's like, hey, it's got to be my way or the highway.
yeah, and I don't necessarily mean in terms of how he's dealing with the devs, but again, my thing is, if we've got a bunch of EQ devs. Some people are saying nobody's going to want to play this style of dwarf. And I'm like, but they're pretty close to the EQ and EQ2 dwarves, and people played those. And I think the devs that we have realize, hey, people have been playing those games for 20 years. So I think we can go with that.
Yeah.
I do want to ask about crafting. So I was able to do quite a bit of harvesting. It's interesting on this alpha because you have to figure out where the stuff is. It's not just anywhere. You have to stumble upon uh, where the harvestable stuff is. I gathered a bunch of stuff, but I did not get to go back to town and use it. So, did any of you try the crafting?
I wasn't able to craft a wand because one of the items, the shard iron, was not craftable, and it looked like some of the stuff I was crafting was getting eaten. You didn't actually see the recipes for some of the stuff, so it was just like poking at the dark, hoping that, you're getting the results that you're hoping for. I found that the harvesting was really funny because there was just one spot where I found all of the resources. There is this little kind of eye-shaped like water around a little island, and just that general area is where I found stone and metal ore, tier 1 herbs, tier 2 herbs, herbs that you need at a higher rank to be able to get, the redwood trees, the higher tier, but you don't know it till you try it, redwood trees that say you need a better axe. It was, if you basically go east, past the first camp, close to the node over there, and then go north a bit to the little eye-shaped sort of island pond thing. That's where it was. Oh, and the fishing, of course. Caught some red snappers. Needed a better rod to catch the other fish I don't know about there. But yeah, I was able to gather stuff just fine. I don't think I got any experience for it, and that was a little disappointing because, it takes, if, there's going to be experience and advancement for things, let me know. And it might have been some invisible thing that's not expressed in the UI right now that, yeah, you are leveling up your harvesting skill the more you do these things, but I didn't see anything of it. And so that's one of the things that's a little disheartening, is that if crafting has levels and specificity, harvesting and processing obviously needs to have it too. Otherwise, it's still a crafter-centric game where the other people are loot targets for the PvPers, and that's all it is. So that was kind of a disappointment for me. Obviously, they're going to do more. They put it in crafting to be like, well, here's an inkling of what it's going to be. This is not the final system. They were very clear about that, disclosed that, very heavily. But I guess from another game I was playing, I was getting really used to any asset I see, I can access. Any boulder, I'll break it. Any ore node, I can probably break it. If I don't have the skill, it'll be very explicit of what skill I need. If I don't have the right tool for it, well, it just goes slower. It's not like you don't get the thing. And so being able to cut down every tree and break every boulder and grab every herb, that it kind of sucked that I had to go to a very special area to find the majority of everything in one concentrated spot.
We haven't had a chance to do our Valheim show yet.
Nope.
But I really like the way crafting works there, and I wish we could have something similar to that here, but I don't think it's going to be that type of thing. Even the gathering, I kind of like there. Now, one question that came up in the forums, or one debate, was whether or not to have sparklies or not.
Well, you have to. If you can't harvest everything, if it's only special magic trees, you got to indicate it.
But in Valheim, I'm able to recognize what I need without sparklies.
Yes, but you can still cut down every tree. It's like you know the trees and you know which ones.
Yeah, but you're not necessarily picking everything that you see. You just are able to recognize. Sometimes you even run out of stuff, right? You've picked everything, so it's not even there. So yeah, you don't know if it's that you've harvested everything and it hasn't respawned, or if it's just not in the area. So there's things, but as long as it's visible and it's clear what I'm looking for, which is what happens in Valheim. When I'm running through a forest, I can stop and go, oh, those are some berries, I'm gonna need those. Oh, those are some raspberries or whatever it is. I can see the stuff and recognize, oh, I'm gonna want to stop and get some of that. I don't need sparklies in that. So if it was like that, sure. I think in Ashes probably gonna need some sparklies. The other thing I could not tell by visually looking at them, the difference between the two types of trees. There was redwood and some other kind of tree that I could harvest.
Actually used the same asset as far as I could tell, because I was able to start to recognize the trees after I'd seen one in the distance. So it's like, oh, okay, that's one of those squiggly red trees with like the little tops exposed. That's got to be a redwood tree. And I go up to it and says, you need the iron axe, dum-dum. It's like, Oh, okay, I guess. Look like the exact same asset to me. So it might have been that they didn't actually have any variants on that, and that might have been why it was hard to identify a tier 1 to a tier 2 tree.
Yeah.
With the harvesting and the crafting, I just honestly don't feel like there's probably much to even talk about, because this is, we already know. You said, what was it? Alpha 2 is when you really should expect even an initial crafting experience. So this all just really seems to be put in for probably, again, just testing back in respawns of stuff and trying to get things to work. I mean, the question on the sparklies. So here would be my thought or argument is you don't have to have sparklies if everything is harvestable, or most things. And that would be, I would much prefer that to, scanning an entire area to try to pick out one or two things that I can harvest. I would rather just be able to run up to any tree. And I don't know that I'm necessarily saying you should it leads to destruction of the tree, but, at least get some fake logs or sticks or something out of it. That would be my sort of preference to the harvesting part, is that you just basically make it all harvestable. And you actually start to learn by visual what isn't harvestable.
How did it work in Landmark? I think they weren't sparkly, but we were able after a while to recognize the trees for sure.
Yeah, because what was the wood type? There was a specific...
Burrow.
Yeah.
Burlwood.
Mm-hmm.
Burlwood was it was initially a rare resource, and then I think they gave it its own tree. But yeah, Landmark, it was pretty much, if you see it, you can take it. There were some limitations to, I want to say, ore, and maybe there were some trees that you needed special tools for. But for the most part, like most types of voxels, you could just go and use your, voxel vacuuming pick and grab it up, and now it's in your inventory.
Yeah. So it just depends. But I really like the way I really like the combat. That's the other thing. Surprisingly, I really like the combat in Valheim 2, whereas normally I'm a Care Bear. There was a recent thread on the forums about active block, and normally I would not have a dog in that fight, but I love the active block on the shield in Valheim that does push back when you get hit. I use that constantly, and I love getting into fights just so I can knock the fuckers back. I wish we could maybe get a little bit more of that if they had active block for some classes or some weapons in Ashes. That could be fun.
That was actually something that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit, is that the combat system and the targeting and everything as it is right now, I have a hard time calling it a hybrid system. Right now, because of the pacing of things and the distances and, things being kind of area and proximal rather than being, very directional and specific and precise, it feels like a tab targeting game. And even if you go action mode, it just feels like a different interface for the tab targeting system. It does not feel like hybrid combat. I don't feel like I have the agency to sidestep or move backwards to get out of range or time a block when I need to, or any of that sort of stuff. So for me, that's a serious weak point, because I'm more into the active combat, and I'm willing to play something with a tab targeting system as a bit of a compromise, but I want something with more precision and more specificity, because I want it to be a little bit more of an active sort of game. I think for the state that it's in, the fact that you have to press your weapon button every time instead of it just being an auto attack is doing the game a disservice. That I think there might have been an auto attack button somewhere. I didn't find it, but the fact that I had to mash Q every time, and then some of the attack effects like the wand didn't really show much, so it's just them doing like this and diddling their wand back and forth, and you see like 6s and 7s pop up on the enemy. It didn't really feel like it had any physicality to it whatsoever.
And then what was the question that I had? Another PvP question that's flew out of my mind while I'm responding to theater elf on harvesting. So you guys go. I'll try and remember it in a
Well,
bit.
we're starting to get towards the end, so actually we're over, but we can keep going. But I was curious, where we're at right now. If you had one surprise of what you're sort of happy with, I guess, or maybe that you didn't expect to be happy with at this point. I think I've already commented on mine. I obviously have always talked about being more crafter based. I'm not really going to do combat or PvP. I'm actually fairly, now I know you don't like the system necessarily, but I actually kind of I've enjoyed the combat so far, which was interesting to me because now there's not a lot more for me to do in testing right now. Anyways, it's not like
Well,
I explored quite a bit too, but I have come to embrace that sort of style a little bit more. I think I mentioned, Genshin Impact, their combat style with that game actually has probably become one of my favorite implementations of combat. But that would be mine. That was sort of surprising. That I think it shows that and I will admit I complained about how long they took for combat. It felt like forever with APOC, and then we had to delay the start of pre-alpha and alpha testing because they were working on combat. It's like, come on, guys. I actually think it seems to be paying off. Personally, is my opinion. Now, the amount of time it took to get something like combat working correctly makes me concerned about the amount of time it will take to get networking working
everything.
correctly. But I feel like it seems to be coming across to me, at least, as time well spent in that area, anyways.
So the epiphany that I had with what Neuro was saying is that Cleric did not seem to have any tab target abilities that I had access to. I think, how many were we able to open? Maybe, I think I opened 4. I unlocked
So I
4.
think.
Yeah, it might have been 5, but I think I only unlocked 4, and they were all action. I don't think I had any tab target.
You could target with the healing one. It's just you had to be targeting players. I'd imagine if they didn't have one, they'll have an alternate key for hold this and press tab to select players.
Did tab and it worked? Okay, I
If
tried.
you, yeah, if you press Z and you move to the action mode, that might have gotten in the way of things a little bit.
Okay. Maybe I had done that, and so I was just stuck in that. I don't know. Okay.
And there were times when I would switch between action mode and conventional mode, and it did help a little bit for the specificity of the things I was trying to do.
But I think the epiphany that I had is I did play it as if it was a tab target game. I did not play it like an action game, but I think some of that was because of the way the mobs attacked. And I mean, for the most part, the mobs didn't attack in a way the mobs did not attack in a way that made me think I need to dodge, or if I dodge, maybe even that I was going to time them.
I just didn't feel like you had the ability to dodge. Like it seemed like once you were close enough that they could hit you, unless you used blink and then kept running the opposite direction, they would just catch right back up to you and start hitting you within their radius again. The video we saw of the bears, the 5,000 bears mauling them on the live stream, Steven got far away from them, and then all the hits finally registered and came through. And it's like, yeah, that's actually kind of how combat felt, even on a small scale. If you get near something that's aggroed, even if you weren't close to it for long enough for it to hit you, you still get hit by it. And that was, definitely a little annoying. You're right, no telegraphed abilities, so there isn't really much room to dodge.
And I typically think of telegraphs as the reticles that appear on the ground or whatever in action games, like NWO is the one, or Wildstar, is that the name of Wild. Was that the name of it?
Wildstar did a lot.
Yeah.
Blade and Soul did it too, if I remember correctly.
I mean, just Wildstar was like wacky and crazy over the top with the reticles. You'd have like 5 and 6 appearing on top of each other and crap. But
GCLO, I think too.
Even just looking at animated telegraphs, meaning like the scale runners, they would do a tail swat. But I wasn't paying attention to see when that was going to be telegraphed. It seemed like by the time they started that, they were just going to hit you. It wasn't really something you could see they were about to do and dodge. Did you look at any of that at any animations to let you know they were about to hit? Were you looking at stuff like that in order to time your dodge or time your parry or time a block?
I would have liked to, but it felt like the current paradigm is just, hotbar dancer, get close and mash your abilities, rather than something where an active blocking system was really present, not pleasant. Being active, it was pleasant too, but it seems like you would just get close, the enemy would start going through its attack cycle, and sure, there's animations for everything, but you're right, no real anticipation, no real like preemptive counterpuncher style where you go in guarded, wait for them to hit, and while they're recoiling, get ready for the next attack, you get a couple of hits and get your shield back up. There was none of that I felt like there was room for in the current model.
Yeah, that's the thing that I really liked in Valheim combat is I can see when the mobs are about to do a strike or do something. I can time their attacks and then bring up my shield if I want to do a block or whatever. So that's right, and that's not even an RPG. That's a freaking survival game, but it was awesome. And that's my other complaint about the combat that was in the alpha, is that it seemed to go too fast. I mean, one, we could solo most things just because they bumped up our levels, and most of the mobs didn't have a ton of hit points in our range. But it seemed very, it seemed very too soloable, and it just seemed like it went by too fast, and I think that was even in previous.
Yeah, no, that's how it was before. I mean, and
Yeah.
in previous testing, I could still at level 3 solo a level 9, 10 thing. I mean,
But
that's
one-on-ones. Like, I found if you try to take on 3 things your same level, like spiders in the cave, for example, you're gonna have a bad time.
No, I had the bandit looking guy. I forget the names. Coin something or other. I would have 3 of them, and again, level 11, 12 for all of them, and I was level 4. I mean, I could still, as a cleric at least, had no problem.
But to me, this is the difference between an FPS and an RPG. Because in an RPG, the ideal is that you're supposed to have a couple people with you. It should take some time, and you see what abilities your partner is using, and you see what abilities the mob is using, and you play off each other and trying to synergize your attacks and what your help and all of that stuff. So that you can work together in order to defeat the challenge, and preferably that's a couple of players or more players against a solo thing. I mean, sure, you should be able to solo a solo mob. The casual, we don't have a lot of time these days, so we shouldn't necessarily have to wait for a group in order to be able to kill stuff. But still, it should take some time so that you can think through your tactics and strategy, not just press Q a bunch of times and know you're going to do a 1 or 2, and then, in 15 seconds, you've killed the mob. I mean, I'd like it to take a little bit more time.
Well, this is still early game. Like that's one of the things that also talked about is minimum level, early level, mid level, and end game level. Combat's going to feel different, and I feel like that's reflected here. That you start off good enough to solo some weak ass stuff, but then probably around 2030, you're going to be running into a lot more stuff that it's like photo finish, just taking on one enemy solo. Or completely dominating them because you have the right skill set and there's actually enough room to express your character's build.
Yeah. I mean, some of that is again because it was quick, but I think that was even in other like Phantom said, that was even in earlier tests.
The NPCs haven't changed at all.
Well, it's changed
the hit
some,
points,
I think, because I was level 3 versus level 1, which is a little different.
I mean, my experience, really, the only thing that I noticed that's changed since, I don't even remember when I last installed it, December, October, is the number of NPCs. The respawn rate was changed. There were, I said extra quests that were added in, not a ton, but some. And then the nodes just had more stuff in them. Other than that, I mean, really everything really was. The mobs were basically the same. No real rhyme or reason to how they were put throughout the world. The levels weren't always, stratified very well. Their hit points were, none of that's changed at all. And I think that's a good point. Was Yodamu? It says I highly doubt they put much effort into scaling it. Yeah, I mean,
highly likely.
Yeah, that's just one of those things. That's where it gets hard, as you're talking on a show like this and you're testing where, you just kind of complain. So it's like, how do you pick things that are bugs and not bugs, expected alpha states?
They could very well have just gotten like a balancing formula from a white paper. It's like, yeah, just plug these numbers in and it's great. Mm-hmm. The one other thing about nodes that I didn't mention is I didn't quite realize it from some of the previous tech demos and stuff, but the way they're represented in the world, it's like while the world was still clay, somebody took a big circular stamp and just went burn, 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 burn all across the map. And so where a node's going to be and how big it is because you see the whole surrounded radius of it. Either it's just a plateau that comes up or there's rocks around it or something. But you could pretty well see, oh, okay, so I'm in this thing, and then inside of it, there's a podunk little camp, and then inside of that is where the actual like vendor NPCs are in like a camp inside a camp. And, that's all stuff that I'm sure will change and upgrade and improve over time. In fact, in one of those nodes, I didn't even realize I was supposed to go into the smaller camp inside the larger camp to find the vendor NPCs. And when I finally came back, it's like, oh, cool. I can buy some weapons and armor here.
Yeah, and so Yodamu, how do you say this? Yodamu says that it seemed very much like it was about backend and testing stability and performance rather than content. And definitely, Steven said that several times. This is not a content test. It's more on core stuff, but still, my hope, just as a precursor to what the possibilities are, as I'm saying, I'm hoping that it's not that fast, and we have, because I think all of the combat that I've seen, even with the devs demoing, it has seemed very fast and not enough time to say, oh, my buddy's using this, so I'm going to use that. That kind of strategy doesn't seem to be enough time for that. And I think that's kind of key to an RPG is, banking off what your group mates are doing. And that's my other problem with DPS meters is it shouldn't be, oh, this individual is striving to get XXX goal DPS. Hopefully you're saying, hey, my pal's using a shadow augment. We're all going for this necromancer or dark magic theme for our group, so we're all going to be using shadow magic, and we want to stack as much shadow augments as we can based on what each other is doing at certain times, rather than, oh, why is your DPS not the best? You need to switch to a frost mage because that has the highest DPS.
And there's a lot that gets lost in just chasing DPS, like your crowd control. If somebody's doing combined 5 minutes of crowd control in a 2-minute battle, just all of the accumulated crowd control across all the enemies, that doesn't really come up on a meter very well. And it's like, well, gee, that battle was really easy. Who did the most damage? All right, you're great. And you, Ice Mage, you suck. Get out of here. It's like, you guys realize I kept everything locked down and slowed, so you had such an easy battle, right? It's like, no, what are you talking about? You didn't do any damage. Get out of here. Yeah, no, that you avoid that when you don't have, the DPS meter focus, and there's, just not any metrics to, single people out. And I think that's also part of what they want to do with, the balancing side is, if it's harder to home in on what might be the best builds or best combinations of builds among multiple players, there's that much more experimenting that's going to be going on. Even at the top end, when you've got your max level gear and your max stuff for your attributes, you've got 5 sets of gear for whatever it is you may ever possibly get into. It's still going to be a lot of figuring out what works with the group and what works against the enemies that you're fighting. And again, this is one of those like playing D&D or not playing D&D sort of things for me. Is I remember DM telling me years ago about a thing that he did to screw with his high-level party, is that he threw like 100 thieving kobolds at them that were just stealing like their potions and their consumables and everything. Anything loose they could grab, they would grab and then run off into the walls where they couldn't be chased. So here you have this badass crew that just got looted by a bunch of things. Sure, they might have killed some of them, but they lost all of their stuff regardless. And these are like half-level things they just need to sneeze on to kill. But they, you couldn't sneeze that quickly compared to how much they were coming in at you. So, I mean, that's the sort of thing that I expect to see, is that we'll see variants of enemies and encounters in such a way that you think you've got it down, you think you know what you're doing, and then suddenly halfway through the fight, you realize, holy crap, we were not prepared for this. And you had the best build on the server up to that point, and then you just got smoked by something that you underestimated. So, I mean, I think that's something that we'll start to see. So we've had a couple of, I was going to say, we've had a couple of little breaks in there. Do we want to keep going or kind of cut it off and come back to hit it more on Sunday?
Time to say goodnight, Gracie.
Yeah,
come back.
We've been a little bit spotty, but a lot, largely for me. But now that I think now that we can kind of just actually start bringing in real experiences to the discussion, that should spark more often that we do the show. So what we plan for Sunday, and keep kind of building on some of this, even going back and looking at like the last development stream, which we didn't do. Now we can kind of talk about it in a whole new light, because we can also talk about the testing that's been going along with it. So the only thing I would say is I'm happy with where things are at. This, I think, again, it's all about a matter of making people understand the state of the game. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. And I think this will be your biggest challenge, is expectations, managing expectations, especially when we go into a non-NDA state. We're used to alpha, we're used to the bugs, to all of that. When you're in front of, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people, I think it'll be a challenge to manage some of those expectations. So, but right now, I don't think there's anything for us to.
I have one last thing to say.
You can, and I'm not finished. You can finish after me.
Go ahead. I just want to make sure you don't end before I say my last.
I was just saying, I think this is exactly where you would sort of expect it to be for an alpha game. There's nothing I would say to be worried about. There's not a whole lot to be necessarily overly joyous about. You're testing. You're in a testing phase. If you're thinking about playing Ashes of Creation right now, you won't be playing Ashes of Creation. You'll be testing it. So, if you really don't like going through all of the rubber banding, the server cycles, all of those things, just wait. Just be patient and wait. But otherwise, yeah. Go ahead.
Because I did complain about no African appearances, but I did want to give kudos. There was a recent concept art that came out that showed someone with African appearance and a braided beard. It was not white. It was black, I think, but it was awesome. So it was nice to even see that in concept art. Um, yeah. So
Yeah,
they're moving forward in a good direction. At least, there's some progress there too.
for sure.
All right. Anything else for tonight?
No, I've still got an entire list of stuff
Yeah, we
didn't
do.
even talk about. So
Well,
we
like
can
I
save
said,
that for Sunday.
Yeah, we now get to revisit a lot of stuff we've sort of theory crafted on and start bringing actual conversations about real experiences. So I'm excited about that. So, that's why we wanted to jump right in on tonight to do this show, because we finally get to start talking about experiences, which is the positive thing. That's also the cool thing, is that when you finally get to go from theory to play testing, it's fun. And you're right, Diggs, you had mentioned that earlier. There have been other games where we've talked, not actually got our hands on anything. Well, not very much. So this is, I think I'm looking forward to.
This ain't the whole cookie, but we got to taste the dough, and it's pretty good.
I should also say, if you guys have not been paying attention to Ashes of Creation Twitter, I don't know how long they've been this active and just dropping cool stuff, pretty much every day. But it's been really cool, the stuff that's been coming in. I mean, I love the questions that are asked to us on Twitter are way better than the stuff that they ask for the dev questions in the forums. A lot of fun. So pay attention to Ashes of Creation Twitter if you haven't been.
All right. Well, folks, everyone have a good Monday. I'm used to saying Sunday, whatever. We'll be back next Sunday to keep continuing on with our. I named the title of this. I kind of laughed because it's the No NDA Q&A episode, but I guess that's basically every episode from now forward. So we look forward to it. Everyone have a good week. See you.
See you later, folks. Thanks for coming.